With that, Jessica, I am going to go ahead and pass them over to you.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Amy, and thank you, North Dakota friends, for showing up on a Thursday night again, many of you. Um, and also, just to kind of tie together what we were talking about last week, I just want to start by acknowledging that we know that being a foster adoptive kinship parent is an incredibly hard job. And I also know there's a huge need. And so I'm really glad that you have stepped up. I also know that being a kid in foster care is really hard too. And as adult adoptees are telling us, yeah, there are great things about adoption, but it starts with a pretty profound loss. And kinship care pulls in all kinds of ambiguous loss and grief. There's so much that we hold as grandparents and aunties and cousins and siblings who are caring for our kin. I want to just help hold the complexity of all these things today and next week as we get together again. Your experience, your kids' experience, and I hope through our time together there might be a few aha moments, loads more compassion for yourself, for your partner if you're parenting with someone, for your kids, and lots of practical tools to help both of your brains, your kids and yours. So Amy, I heard you say we're doing making sense of meltdowns, but I actually had us on for creating space for better
Oh,
behavior.
hey, that
So,
that works for me.
okay.
Works for me. I'm game. I don't
Okay, cool.
I don't think anyone's gonna complain. I don't know. I just need to soak in your wisdom. So that works.
Well, we'll chat about coming back for making sense of meltdowns another time because
Yeah,
there's all kinds of fun stuff we could talk about with the sensory systems.
love
But
it.
for today, we're gonna dive back in. We're gonna dive back into this series of help, hope, and healing. And specifically today, we're going to talk about this acronym of PACE, P-A-C-E, which I'll explain later. And we're going to use that chat again tonight. We will also have the opportunity to get a little creative together. You're going to build your own sort of personalized cheat sheet as we go. So if you can, grab a piece of paper and a pencil or pen, something to write with. I would love it if you could find, oh, I see a kiddo just helping out there. A piece of paper, a notepad, a journal, something where you have, and something to write with. That's all you need. We're just going to kind of make our own little cheat sheet for ourselves. That way you can really personalize it. I'm going to mention a lot of different ideas tonight. And as with most things related to parenting, some of them are going to be just the right thing in the right moment for you and your family. And some of them are not really going to apply. And so I want you to be able to sort of pick and choose the things that you want to really hold on to. I want you to start today by thinking about a behavior, a situation, an incident, like the kind of thing that sort of sends you into your downstairs brain. So we talked last week about those downstairs brain moments that we all have, even as grown-ups, where our brains can get very protective. So for us as adults, some of those clues that our downstairs brain might be taking over could look like this, could look like, our face is getting all grumpy, there's frustration under the surface, raised eyebrows, behaviors feel personal, lots of complaining on our end. We just, need to vent all the time. Venting is worthwhile. It's necessary sometimes when you're doing hard jobs, but if we're finding that's all we're doing, that's a clue that porcupine brain is taking over. Tiger brain takes over. We talked about this last time when we're yelling or talking negatively. Quick flip to anger, jumping straight to those punitive consequences, getting in someone's face, jumping into that power and control mode instead of thinking things through and cooperating and collaborating. That last one's my big clue for myself. I know when I am like, I just want the behavior to stop, that my tiger brain is kind of kicking in. Our downstairs brain moments might look like a little bit more hidden away, a little bit more of that chameleon, losing boundaries, retreating into social media, joining the negative voices, or feeling paralyzed, maybe unsatisfied unless the day is perfect, right? That might be how our downstairs brain is showing up. Maybe you notice more turtle moments in yourself where you're shutting down, you want to avoid that kiddo, not connecting with peers and other supports. I see a lot of people who are not in their turtle brains just by showing up tonight. Maybe that doom scrolling on your phone, sort of looking for all the worst things, feeling sad and alone, or zoning out, escaping reality. These are signs that turtle brain might be taking over. So we all have downstairs brain moments. It happens. I want you to think about what are some of those interactions, some of those situations at home, maybe there's one kiddo in particular that kind of, it seems like you keep getting caught in those downstairs brain cycles. Jot it at the top of your paper. And then what you're going to do is kind of create two columns where you have one side that's about, here, I'll turn off my screen share for a second. One side, I want you to think about prevention. What are we doing to not get into this situation, right? What are our strategies for building the skill that maybe is lacking, or offering support, or getting our own support? Like, what are our prevention strategies on one side? Some of what we talk about tonight might fall in that category. Some of them are big prevention strategies. Some of them are little, like, using a little playfulness in a moment that might have escalated or whatever. So what are our prevention strategies on one side? And then what are some in the moment things that you want to hold on to from tonight? So what are some of those, like, how do I handle this in the moment, right? Okay. So those are your two columns. You can think about any manner of the kinds of things that happen from day to day, but I want you to make your own cheat sheet as we go. So this is where we left off last time, that brains are built from the bottom up with lots of help from safe adults. We have an upstairs and a downstairs brain, and that downstairs brain, it is ready to kick into action when we are born. In fact, for our kids who have had some hard times in life, their downstairs brain probably has gotten really strong. So in our kiddos, we might see more of these downstairs brain moments. There are the 4 that I already talked about as we think about ourselves. But I also think it's important for us to hold this squirrel moment that is so common in the aftermath of trauma, that it becomes harder to think of others. So we want to squirrel all the resources away for ourselves, whether those resources are physical, so hoarding, sneaking, stealing kinds of behaviors, or maybe those resources are more about affection, or like jealousy can be really big and loud if you haven't always felt like you've had enough physically to meet needs, but also enough emotionally to meet needs. And then, of course, we see tiger moments and chameleon moments and turtle moments in our kiddos, just like we have them as adults. No part of the brain is bad, but our brains do sometimes get extra protective. So building that staircase of the brain, that top to bottom connection, we made the brain with our hand last time, building that connection where our upstairs brain can stay intact. That actually, well, it takes a long time to develop. Our brains don't mature until they're about 25. We don't get really solid super speed highways going. And in the aftermath of trauma, that building that staircase of the brain, building our capacity for calm, curious, connection seeking functioning, that requires help. That requires help for everyone. The reality is, building the upstairs brain requires the help of someone else's upstairs brain. This is why I'm a really big fan of helping parents and teachers and counselors and social workers and everyone to put on their brain goggles when we're thinking about behavior and discipline, not just so we can see where kids or teens are in their brains, but also so we know where we are, so we can bring our curious, compassionate, proactive, problem solving upstairs brain to the situations that we face. So that's our 3-minute recap on an hour and a half last week. To kind of round that out, I know several of you were able to download or get this triggers and glimmers. If you didn't have a chance yet, or if you have no idea what I'm talking about, if you go to my resource library at jessicasonarski.com/grow and put in your name and email address and just hit reply. So you'll get access to my whole free resource library, but just hit reply and say North Dakota, and I'll make sure I send you this triggers and glimmers. For those of you who did get it and have been kind of thinking about this or mulling, maybe you tucked it in your purse or had it by your nightstand, did anyone do a little bit more reflection throughout the week? You don't have to share. This can get very personal, but I am curious if anyone is willing to share what they noticed as you sort of tuned in to your own upstairs brain glimmers, like what is feeding you, what is feeling good as a parent, what are these moments that kind of help you steady, and what are the things that send you into that downstairs brain. Again, I know this can be kind of personal, so if you don't want to put it in the chat, I will not be offended. Sometimes these things are better to kind of mull on ourselves or talk over with our safe big critters, the people that we trust. Okay. So Amy put that info in again to let you know where you can get that. And honestly, this is something I come back to with folks over time, lots and lots of time, because we're all, well, one, they change, and two, especially both sides of this are really important. So noticing what makes us smile, noticing what helps us feel steady, what motivates us to keep going. These are so important for having the strength to keep going in this really tough job you're doing. I see here, I noticed I go into my downstairs brain when I feel like I will be late going somewhere. I think I see some thumbs up, like many of us can relate to that. I certainly do. One of my kiddos is just runs on a different speed than I feel like the rest of the world. I know that's not true, but that's how it feels sometimes. And it sends the whole family into tiger brain a lot of times. And so we find ourselves doing this balance of trying to be proactive and think things through and prevent these situations from getting to where they're at the explosion point, and also figuring out how we can steady in the moment, right? Okay. I am going to not be looking at the chat for a minute. So Amy, please, if there's something, a clarifying question or something that you think I should pause for, interrupt me. I'm all for that. I want to make sure that this is a time that is really making sense for everybody that's here. All right. I titled this talk Creating Space for Better Behavior because I'm going to teach you about PACE. So PACE is this framework developed by Dan Hughes. He's a psychologist who has decades of experience working with kids with really significant trauma histories. But I add this little S at the beginning because before we can be paceful, before we can put these fantastic strategies, for lack of a better word, into use, we have to have some upstairs brain power ourselves. So I wish we could just wait for our kids to behave better so that we could be in our upstairs brain. But I know we need to get really good at our own self-regulation. So that S in space stands for self-regulation. And I'll be honest with you, sometimes, no matter how old you are, self-regulation, like being able to steady yourself, being able to make a conscious choice instead of being reactive and flipping your lid, that's what we mean by self-regulation. There are times, no matter your age, that requires some co-regulation, where you're kind of borrowing the steadiness of someone else, where you're reaching out for help, where you're needing a little support to feel ready and back in your upstairs brain. I also want to share just a quick little, checklist, for lack of a better word, for when you notice yourself dipping. So if you want to jot this down somewhere, you're welcome to. It's probably something that maybe you already do in some capacity, but just having some words for it can be helpful. So when you notice yourself dipping or getting frustrated in the same kind of moment all the time, or like for me, when I say dipping, I mean my mood dips. Like I feel that sense of like, oof, like something feels heavy. Our first step, as silly as it sounds, is just to notice it. Notice that it happened. For me, so this played out at one point not too long ago when I got an email from one of my boys' teachers. I have 3 boys who are 10, 13, and 15. And it had been like I had read this email, it was in the middle of my workday, and then later, an hour or so later, I was like, why am I feeling so off? Like, what is going on? Well, it started when I got that email. So I'm going to name it. I feel a little sad that this incident happened. It was about something that happened at school. I even felt a little bit like a failure as a mom right in that moment. Right here, I talk to people all the time about parenting, about brains, about child development, and my kid did this thing, right? So recognizing sort of the story I'm telling myself about how big and terrible and awful this thing is, how I'm failing my child, how this teacher is, mad at me or mad at my kid or whatever it is, that I want to name how big this is getting for me. When when we talk about like our downstairs brain getting loud when we're running late for something, we can name like, I don't want to be that person who's always late, or I'm going to get in trouble with my boss. Like this is a really big problem. And part of why it feels really big to me is because I'm a responsible person and this is making me look like I'm not, right? And then this step is really important to by normalize it, I don't mean like no big deal. What I mean by normalize it is this holding both that you'll probably hear me talk about a lot if you spend any time with me at all, that it feels really big for a reason, or it is significant for a reason, whatever I'm feeling. And so that, if I go back to this incident with my kid and his teacher, it's also things that kids do. And it doesn't mean I'm a failure. Like, of course, I felt that way in this moment because of a whole host of reasons. And that's not the end of the story. And then we don't just stop there. Like, okay, those are the feelings, but we want to think about that next step. What is the need? So often when it comes to our own, I'll speak for myself. So often when it comes to my self-regulation and a lot of the parents that I work with, it comes back to some really basic needs. I am the worst parent when I am hungry or when I'm overtired. Sometimes it's bigger than that. Sometimes maybe the need is some skill building for my kiddo that maybe I need to phone a friend and kind of talk it out. Maybe I need a support group, some connections, some resources. Maybe I just need a good laugh, right? There are times that the need for me when I'm feeling unsteady and when my kid's behavior feels really big to me and out of control. Um, and I'm doing the things where, we're getting the therapy, or, I'm reaching out in the ways that I need to reach out, and it's just part of the process. Sometimes I just need to laugh with my friends a little bit. I need to send a SOS message to say, somebody send me a funny GIF. I'm drowning tonight, right? And get a response back from somebody who gets that I love my kid. Um, and parenting's really hard. And sometimes we need to laugh about the ridiculousness of it. Maybe that need is rest or fresh ideas, not somebody to blame or something to blame, but some new compassionate ways of seeing things, maybe some empathy. Um, that's my little cheat sheet for that S part of getting ourselves in a state where we can really work on this brain building power of pace. So with our upstairs brain in charge, we can help our kiddos build their upstairs brains. All right, I'm going to check the chat real quick here. I see the question, what is the part of the brain when they are all over the place, like hyper and bouncing all over? So when a kid's energy level is super high, there's a couple reasons that might be. I'm going to turn my screen share off for just a second. So sometimes it's because their need is for more physical movement. They need more bouncing, squishing, squeezing, crashing, banging kinds of things happening. So this is especially true for any kids who have some sensory processing challenges. This is true for kids with ADHD. Often like the organic style ADHD, the kind that my boys have, thanks to it running through my family on all the sides. It's also true for what kind of looks like ADHD sometimes, what looks like attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, but is really maybe hypervigilance, is really sort of dysregulation because they haven't felt calm and safe and steady in a relationship with a caregiver. And so as far as what part of the brain is in charge, I would say certainly there are some downstairs brain elements to that especially when it's impulsive or destructive or hurting themselves or others. I also just want to really, really normalize that a lot of kids need a lot more physical activity than they get. And so sometimes we can dial down some of that hyperactivity by giving them like way more than we think humans should need. If you are curious more about some of that sensory stuff, actually, I think I just put a blog up about making sense of meltdowns. So you can go, Amy, if you want to pop over onto my blog, you can pop that in the chat. That's a great place to just learn a little bit more about that beyond what we'll have time for tonight. Great question. Thank you for putting that in there. I also see here, I went into my downstairs brain when I found that a child was wiping snot on my couch pillows, right? That feels really personal. It may or may not be, but it feels super gross. And we could actually talk about some of the things that are happening in the brain when that happens, because yeah, there's all kinds of aspects of that. So thank you for popping that in the chat as well. All right. Yes, trauma is a big factor. I'm glad you're pulling that through. That is significant. So if you came on the call a little bit late, grab a piece of paper. You are making your own little cheat sheet tonight for things you can do to prevent some of those behaviors that push your buttons, as well as some in the moment rescue strategies. Like, what can you do? What are some of your ways to intervene in the moment that help to build the brain? Because that's what we're in the business of. We are a big part of whether or not our kids build that staircase of the brain and are able to develop this rich human upstairs brain. Okay, great questions. So, come on, screen share. There you go. With our upstairs brain in charge, we start this, we can think more about this concept of pace. So let's set the stage a little bit here. Pace is more a way of interacting than a specific technique. I'm gonna give you some ideas about ways to be playful and accepting and curious and empathic, but it's more about it's not like it's not a formula, right? It's not a box you check and then you're done with it. For those who maybe have multiple roles here tonight, maybe you work in this space as well. I know several people, some are on the call who are in more of a supporting parents role. I just want to mention that this is for parents and professionals alike, that a lot of times parents need a little pace from us as the helpers in the mix, therapists, social workers, support. Pace is not linear, so we're going to talk about it in order. We're going to talk about playfulness, acceptance, curiosity, empathy, but it's not like you have to be playful and then curious and then empathic and then, right, like mix it up, use your tools. That's why I want you to make your own little cheat sheet. Pace is impossible to do all the time, just like we can't be in our upstairs brains all the time, and our kids certainly can't. There is no such thing as perfect parenting, period. Repair, so coming back into relationship after you've had some kind of rupture, that's a really important part of brain building. It's an important part of this process. It's an important relational kid-parent function as well. And then one of the other reasons I love talking about pace is that it's really powerful, not just for the kid that you're doing it for, but it's powerful for us who are choosing to show up in this way. And my hope is that that will, well, certainly as you try these things out, I think that you'll notice that, but maybe even tonight as we're discussing it a little bit, that will become more and more clear. All right, so you'll see some images tonight that are from Riley the Brave Makes It to School. Nope, that's the only image you'll see from Riley the Brave Makes It to School. That book is all about pace. It is pace in action in story form, and the afterword has just some little blurbs to help keep it in mind for parents and teachers and counselors. So one of the things that gets demonstrated in there is the power of playfulness. Play and playfulness is such a undervalued, I think, aspect of human development. It is an effective way of waking up the upstairs brain in stuck moments, right? So that's what you see here. Riley's having a grumpy porcupine moment and the elephant saying, if you're not going to wear this, I guess I will, and puts it on his head. What do you think? Right? Being a little bit silly, because that has the power to help the signal reach that upstairs brain again when a kiddo is stuck. I highlight playfulness. So I'm not talking about just like sitting down and playing checkers. I'm talking about a little lightness, talking about, some enjoyment, like finding little moments of enjoyment. Part of what we communicate, even with sometimes with our eyes, with our facial expression, with our tone of voice, is that there's a sense of hope that we can figure this out, that we're not in despair, that we're choosing to be a team in the midst of whatever challenge is in front of us. So I'll give you a little bit of, kind of rapid fire ideas of ways that can be just so helpful with adding a little playfulness into into what you're doing. And as I'm kind of talking through this, I think after I'm done tonight, I'll put some of these slides into a PDF and send it on to Amy so she can send it to you guys who are here. So don't feel like you have to write everything down if you're a person who likes to have those visuals. I am a visual learner. So Amy, I'll make sure I get you a PDF of some of these things so that you can come back to them later. So when I'm talking about playfulness, it's things like using props. So here, the elephant is brushing its teeth, and that can help us get to the kiddo brushing their teeth. I'm talking about things like another way of using like stuffed animals or props is bedtime is a great time for this, where I'm going to stop my screen share for a second. I don't have any stuffed animals right here, but where you might like, if the kiddo's having a hard time, because many kids do at nighttime, like night is a scary time for many reasons. And again, we could spend lots of time talking about going to sleep. Things like talking to the stuffed animals while you're tucking them into bed. Oh my gosh, Sally's having a hard time settling down. Do you see that, Fluffy? I know, it's so hard sometimes. All right, me and Fluffy are going to take some big deep breaths. We're going to go. And Fluffy's going to get a little, Fluffy's going to help settle down, right? That we can use the stuffed animals, we can be silly with blankets, we can make faces, using props as a way to bring a little lightness to a time that can be stressful and dysregulating for the kiddo, right when you're super tired and just want them to go to sleep. That's, I think, the part of why bedtime can become the witching hour is that it's naturally a time that can be really, really hard for kids with trauma, and naturally a time that parent brains are just done. So if you're struggling with that, you are not alone. A couple other things on the list were an exaggerated voice. So you have to be a little careful of whether your kiddo is going to take it as sarcasm or think you're babying them, but things like being a little over dramatic about stuff can just be a way to lighten the mood. So, I know it's so annoying that I want you to dock your phone at night and I won't let you have it in your room. I get it. That would be frustrating to me too if I was 15 years old. I hear you. I hear you. Yep, we're going to go ahead and do it anyway. I know. Right? Like a little bit of that exaggeration can help you avoid the power struggle, that you're not trying to reason with them or get them to understand your side. You're just kind of meeting them where they are, I guess. Be a team. I think this is especially important when we're in the world of foster care, because these kiddos are coming into situations where the play is already in progress and suddenly they're supposed to fall into step. And so little ways that you can show that you're on Riley's team. And, these are some things that we do as the Smiths, and we're so glad you're here. And here's how we want to be on your team, Riley, right? Code words can be super helpful. So I'll give you a real life example for this one. One of my boys who had lots of meltdowns, had some sensory stuff. We noticed this pattern where even when we were going to go do something fun, he would like melt, like literally like, right? Like do that thing of sort of falling to the ground and not wanting to get shoes on and complaining and whatever, which of course sends my brain into the downstairs. And so we'd kind of get in a power struggle about it, or I'd be trying to reason with him when his little lid is flipped and reason isn't on. You're going to love it. It's fine. Like, what, blah, blah, blah. So I'm noticing this pattern and deciding, I need to do something in the prevention column. We got to get out ahead of this. So I said, hey, we're like doing something. I don't even remember what we were doing, setting the table for dinner or talking after school, or I don't know. I was like, hey, I've noticed, folding laundry. I've noticed, even when we get ready to go do something that I think will be fun, it's hard. It's hard to make that transition. And I'm wondering, I saw it happen. We were going to go to that neighborhood party and you kind of melted and I got frustrated. And I wonder if we could have a code word because do you remember you kind of had fun at the party? Yeah, I had fun. Okay, yeah. So I noticed that too. I wonder if we could have a code word for when that's happening. Like when it seems like that the sort of melting is happening and I don't want to get frustrated with you. I get it. Transitions are hard, whatever. Um, Pizza became our code word. And so when he started to melt the next time, I was like, I got frustrated first for a minute and then was like, oh, wait, I have a strategy. And then I was like, pizza, 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 pizza. And then I'm coming alongside him. So I'm moving my body, like not aggressively by any means, but just sort of guiding him to his shoes. Maybe I'm just putting the shoes in the car and we're just gonna walk to the car in our socks and get them on there, right? And I'm saying pizza the whole time, partly to keep my upstairs brain on. And sure enough, that helped ease these transitions. We had this code word that not only helped him like pause in this autopilot of getting stuck, but also helped me not get into a power struggle or frustration mode or, power and control over this thing that he's struggling with. He's not trying to give me a hard time. He's not trying to be difficult. This is hard for him. Whether I feel like it should be hard for him or not, it is. And the more we can kind of deal with what is, the better. So that's what I mean by code word. Also on the list is inside jokes. This is especially helpful with your older kiddos. If there's something that comes up that you both have a little giggle about, remember that and come back to it. Don't beat it to death. But a parent and teen I was working with, the teenager was getting ready to take their driving test and they were super anxious, like just feeling it, right? And the evaluator or whatever comes out and he is wearing like Top Gun style jacket, aviator shades, and they both just kind of looked at each other like, is this really happening? Like I have Top Gun for my instructor, and it like lightened the mood right that moment. And it became an inside joke between them. So she had slipped aviator glasses in his stocking at Christmas, and they had a little giggle about that. When he's starting to feel stressed, that they'll like blare the song from Top Gun on the speaker. Like, look for those little moments, especially with your teenagers, and especially with your kids in foster care who are teenagers, because they need that lightness in their life. There's a lot that's really heavy. And last but not least on that little list is don't take yourself too seriously. This is really hard when our stress brain is on, when we're doing a million things at once, trying to get dinner on the table, and that kid is just not listening. I get it. But that's my encouragement to you. And so if that kind of resonates, if that feels like a good encouragement to you, jot it down on your list. Remember, right? We can use a little playfulness. I like thinking about this phenomenon. Like we have those moments. We could talk a lot more. And actually next week, we'll talk a little bit more about some of those frustration points, like defiance and disrespect. And I hear this sometimes, right? The kid won't listen unless I yell. We could really dissect that. But I want to give you one little playful strategy for this. And that is, instead of yelling, try singing. So hear me out. It might be something like, so this would happen, my kid would like ask me the same question a million times. And as I'm ratcheting up to flip my lid, I would sing instead and be like, I've already answered that question and the answer hasn't changed. And maybe I'm giving his sensory system a little love by dancing him around or doing a playful squeeze or push and pull. And this achieves two things. It helps me get back in my upstairs brain, and it has a better chance of actually waking up his upstairs brain than me just yelling. So I know that yelling, quote unquote, works sometimes, but it depends on our definition of works. So if we want fear-based obedience, yep, sometimes yelling works. If we condition kids to only listen when we yell, yep, that might work. It doesn't work as an upstairs brain builder. So as silly as it sounds, maybe sing goes in your in the moment column. Oh, and I was ahead of the game here. So this is Making Sense of Meltdowns is the blog post I mentioned, and it's especially important for your kids who need a little extra sensory support. So if you have kids who seem to be who have trouble with transitions, maybe they're irritated by fabrics or bouncing off the walls or just dysregulated a lot of the time, I would really encourage you to check that out. Okay, it's time to get ready to type into the chat because you are going to help each other out putting this into practice. So it doesn't have to be something that I mentioned today. It can be any idea that you have. What is a playful way to deal with the eye roll? How could you respond to an eye roll or a moment of defiance using that P in pace, that playfulness that we've been talking about here? Go ahead and pop it into the chat. What do you think? All right, we've got big eyes. So maybe we do it too. Right, do it even bigger back to them. This is that thing where you have to kind of know your kiddo and whether they're going to see that as you mocking them or see it as you like playfully doing it back. Maybe you start singing. I can look up and I can look over and I can look over the other way. You don't have to have a great singing voice, just be silly with it. Great. Make funny face. Wait, are you making funny faces? I didn't know we got to do that right now. I was just saying get ready for dinner and then your eyes rolled back in your head. Yes, roll back, but in a silly way. Dramatic, playful eye roll back. Just say, I know, it stinks, but we gotta go. Great, right? These are all excellent ways. Do it playfully with a laugh. There was a mom I was working with who was super, like, this was a button for her. The eye roll was a button. This was not a behavior that was tolerated when she was young. And, but she had a kiddo who was super expressive from birth, and the eye roll was a thing. And so mom sort of tamed her trigger about it a little bit and saw that it wasn't her purposely pushing her button, that this was just part of her daughter and part of how she communicated sometimes. And she started to expect it a little bit, not meaning expect it like, sure, it's fine, be disrespectful, but expect that the knee-jerk reaction might be that quick eye roll. That doesn't mean she's not going to obey. That doesn't mean she's not going to, follow through with whatever the thing is. She's not going to have a reasonable conversation at some point, but her knee-jerk reaction might be an eye roll. So let me just sort of accept that that's the case. And then one of her things that she found really helpful was saying, oh my gosh, you got to teach me I can't get my eyes that far back. Like, you can say more with your face than I have ever seen anyone be able to do. And it just disarms it a little bit. It just takes the juice out of this thing that used to be this explosion point between them. I see a couple more good ones here. I act shocked and tell them their eyes almost got stuck. For teens, I would do it back, but dramatic and funny. Chase them and say that I'm gonna poke you in the eye, and they laugh. just the person explains they don't actually chase them and poke them in the eye. They just make it a joke. I appreciate that clarification. Right, there's just these silly ways to take the temperature down a little bit for some of these behaviors that can push our buttons. Awesome, you guys get it. So, I am such a big fan of playfulness. I also know it's hard to keep it in mind as a busy parent. So it ends up being something that I talk about online a fair bit. So if you are on Facebook or Instagram, I do Playful Tuesday posts every week with little ideas of ways to keep that power of play and playfulness in our parenting. All right. It is, well, it's 7:53 for you guys. It's 8:53 for me. We have 3 more little aspects of this that all kind of overlap with each other in a way. So we're going to talk about acceptance, curiosity, and empathy. So let's start with acceptance. So there are a lot of misnomers at times about what acceptance is or is not, particularly like the kind of acceptance I'm talking about. So I want to be super clear here. So we're going to start with that. When I'm talking about acceptance in the context of pace, like creating space for better behavior, I am not talking about permitting dangerous behavior. I do think it's important that we think about the wishes, the feelings, the thoughts, the urges, the motives behind an action. So it goes a little bit past what we have the scope to talk about tonight, but this comes into play even as we're thinking about sexual behaviors, as we're thinking about things that maybe even get violent, that we want to understand and accept the deeper wish or need or discomfort or something that is driving behavior, instead of just jumping into judging thoughts and feelings, judging actions. It's teasing that apart a little bit. Acceptance is acknowledging that the other person's inner experience just is, it's not right or wrong, instead of evaluating their motives in that moment. That's not the purpose of this moment. Acceptance involves setting limits while normalizing what might lead to a desire or behavior or choice. So it might be that you need to have, I say all of this really carefully because some of this can get twisted and abused, and some of it can be used really well in healthy ways. Like sometimes there are situations where we need to have cameras on the house, or we need to have we need to have certain things locked up or things like that. And so those baby gates need to be in place. Those limits need to be there, but without shame and blame, without it being about, well, because he's such a liar and a thief, this is what we've sunk to, right? It's more about, man, it's really hard to control that impulse. Or of course, alcohol sounds like a good idea in the moment because he just wants to numb out because life has been really, really hard. And I get that that's the feeling there. That doesn't mean go give the kid alcohol, but acceptance is about seeing what's underneath. Does that make sense? I feel like this is a dicey thing to not have in like conversation. And to be recorded. So let's just be super clear here. Okay. When we're talking about acceptance, I think of our tone of voice really matters. We can communicate, we can still be the authority, but are we looking to control or to connect with a kiddo, even in these difficult situations? With acceptance, we really want to look for and name the feeling when possible. And that can be really tricky because Well, for a couple reasons. One, sometimes it's hard to even know what the feeling is. The other is sometimes that feeling is really, really vulnerable. And so it's easier to cover it with bravado. Like, I don't care, do whatever you want. Like, um, so looking for that and naming that feeling is can be a lot sometimes. We also, when we're thinking about acceptance in the context of creating space for better behavior, a lot of times it means co-regulating those big feelings. So some of you on the call tonight have little ones, and I think those young years are there are so many opportunities for this where we communicate acceptance of kids' big feelings. And it's in things like, the 2-year-old that wants another cookie. Oh, I know. And throws a fit in the middle floor. You wanted that so bad, didn't you? Come on, come on, come on, come on. I know. Here, let's go play with our trucks. Right? What I just communicated with my tone of voice, with how I interacted with this kiddo, was that I accept that he wants more cookies in that moment, right? That's acceptance. It doesn't mean it's okay to steal them. It doesn't mean it's okay to take your brothers. It doesn't mean it's okay to shove them all in your face. I'm not saying like, yes, please eat all of the cookies. That's not what acceptance is. But I can communicate with my tone of voice, and that I understand that wanting those cookies turned into a meltdown, right? And so often what we're seeing in our 10-year-old or 15-year-old is that same phenomenon, whether it's related to much bigger and scarier things than cookies, or whether it's related to things that we don't even know that they went through, or uh, I there's a story that kind of pulls this into light that I'm going to try to tell, knowing that there may be young ears listening. So there was a kiddo who, let's find a code word, who had had some really negative, I don't know, Scotch tape experiences, right? They'd had some really negative Scotch tape experiences. Do we all know what I mean by Scotch tape? Maybe, yes, no. And then was in this home. Okay, so I mean, maybe Amy, can you send a private message to clarify what I mean? So had experienced some negative things, and then was in a home with her sibling and was caught doing those same Scotch tape things to the younger sibling. And the parents were understandably distraught. Like, oh my gosh, this kid is messed up. Why? Like, she should know better. This was terrible, whatever. When we pulled some acceptance into it, and this is all going.
I'm not sure why, but my chat won't go through.
Oh, weird. Okay.
I can't post in the chat, and I was earlier. It's locked. So yes, that's exactly what I was trying to write.
Okay. So when I say Scotch tape, that's what I mean. I'm trying to be really careful, but I think this is an important story. So I want to be conscientious of both. So I typed in the chat, when I say Scotch tape, I'm talking about not Scotch tape, but that. I don't know what the kiddos who are within earshot have experienced, so I want to be super careful.
Yep. So
exactly.
we're good that way.
Exactly.
Yep. You never know if they might walk in the room, so we're good.
Exactly. So, so this little girl was doing the same thing to her younger sibling, and of course, parents were horrified and worried, and the therapist that was working with them was working in a peaceful way and was like, I wonder what was going on, and got curious. We haven't gotten there, but got curious with this kiddo about what might be happening. And what came to light is that this little girl was trying to protect her sister from the pain of what she had experienced, because maybe if she knew more about Scotch tape, it wouldn't hurt so bad. Maybe if she knew more about how to do the Scotch tape better, she would be protected. It was coming from, it wasn't appropriate behavior. We needed to put safety parameters in place to make sure that wasn't happening, right? Like, doesn't mean accept the behavior. But when we assume the best of people, when we get curious about what might be going on, even with the biggest, ugliest, most concerning behaviors, there is real power in that. I apologize to everyone who is confused about the Scottish tape situation, but I just do want to protect little ears. I think too, again, for any professionals on the call, this acceptance piece is important in our work with parents as well, because there is often big despair and hurt and anger and grief and shock and feelings of failure when we are trying to deal with big, overwhelming behaviors. And so, of course, we want the behaviors to stop. And so maybe that's as parents what we're coming in with, that can be really uncomfortable as professionals. And so I just encourage us all to use PACE as we're navigating this. Yes, absolutely. So much tough stuff in foster care. Like no 9-year-old should have to deal with this stuff. No 9-year-old should know what this even is. And yet here we are. Okay, so let's talk. We've already kind of edged our way into talking about curiosity. So again, when I'm talking about curiosity, I'm really not talking about building a case, like interrogating to discover, but really understand. It's like this open-handed, like understanding what's going on. I think of it, I know this probably isn't the first time you've seen some version of a trauma iceberg, right? There's always so much that we don't see, even for your kiddos that came to you, right home from the hospital, or at 6 months or at 2 years. There's a whole lot of brain development. There's a whole lot of loss and grief and big feelings that can be brewing under the surface. And so what I'm encouraging us is to when we see the behavior that we don't like seeing, that is not acceptable, whether that's hurting others or lying or just irritable and prickly all the time or whatever it is. I'm not saying that I just want to hug your whole little brain and be like, I get it. Of course, that sends you into defense mode. Of course, you want to shut that down. And my encouragement is to really help you just pause and look underneath. So at its core, curiosity is about practicing that pause before we react to undesirable behavior, however big or small it may be. So I'm going to give you some little examples, right? So here's a little one, literally a little one, like a little kid, as well as a little example. So he's pulled all these little wipes out of that container. That's what's going on here. And he is just tickled with himself. He did such a good job pulling the wipes out. I'm sure it was super fun. It felt great, right? Like he is happy as a clam. And I thought it was pretty darn cute because he looks pretty darn cute right there. So I snapped a picture. If this was a bottle of ketchup all over the white carpet, if I was stressed and trying to get out of the house and now there's no wipes in the container, why did you do that? The same behavior might spark a very different reaction in me, right? Even though for him, the motivation behind this, quote unquote, obviously we're starting small, undesirable behavior is just curiosity and exploration and normal kid stuff, right? Another example that comes to mind is I had told one of my boys to go and put his clothes away. Okay, for some kids, that's too broad of a command and is guaranteed to fail. He had the skills, he knew what he was doing, like that was an appropriate ask for him. And I got upstairs that night before bed, and he had, here, I'll stop my screen share for a sec. He had, there are these clothes in front of his dresser. And I, in my super regulated upstairs brain was like, what is this? I told you to put your clothes away. Excellent example of paceful parenting right there. Thankfully, he had a little bit of a staircase in his brain because he's like, no, wait. So these are my clothes for Monday, and these are my clothes for Tuesday, and these are my clothes for Wednesday. Like, oh my heart. So here, what I thought was a mess was him being prepared and proactive for his week and doing a little planning, like, yes, please, let's have that. So we just needed to find a way that it would work, that it didn't look like a mess, like we just needed a plan. If I had paused, if I had said, wait a minute, I thought I told you to put clothes away. What's going on here? Thankfully, he had enough upstairs brain power to not snap back at me. But we know that's not always the case. And so I feel like those little examples can help as we think about how powerful curiosity can be in the big moments. How different is it to say, whew, what was going on? You got kicked out of school for smoking pot. I wonder how you feel when you smoke. Don't have this conversation when they're high. That's not going to go well, but at a later date. Some fascination, some desire to understand. Instead of just building a case against them, if we can be curious with them, we have a shot at really knowing them. And for many of our kids, they have never had a safe adult know them. That is catastrophic. That is heart-wrenching. And as I say that, I know everyone here in this room is trying to show up as a safe adult. And it feels really crappy when that trying to show up is not reciprocated, is not met with somebody who can share with you why they had that big meltdown, or can get help with addiction, or is struggling in really, really big ways, and you are trying to be safe and show up for them. I know how heartbreaking that can be. And so again, I hope that part of what you pull from our time together is this reinvigoration, I guess, that we're in it together, that it's not you versus this kid, but that we're really trying to understand and help them, not to lecture and judge them. That we're willing to step out of ourselves and follow their lead for a minute. I don't mean follow them down a deep, dark path to drug addiction and prison. But go to, instead of saying, I will not allow drug use in my house. No, I will not have drug addicts here. If we can be curious with them about what is really happening, what's driving this behavior, it can be so powerful. One little speech tip I will give, why did you do that is almost never going to be answered with anything other than I don't know, or F you, or something else that's not particularly helpful or appropriate. So ways to show curiosity sound a lot more like, what do you think was going on? Or what do you think that was about? Or sort of guessing aloud. I wonder if, and then make your best educated guess. And they will either kind of look at you like, how'd you figure that out? Or wildly disagree in a way that that you missed the mark there. And then maybe, oh, no, I guess it wasn't that. This is just a mystery for us to solve together, isn't it? That's the kind of curiosity that I'm talking about. So I'll give you another really concrete example. There was a dad I was working with who was processing how to put curiosity in action. We'd been talking about pace. He'd gotten a couple playful skills under his belt. He was wrestling with acceptance in bigger ways, and we were talking about curiosity. And he's one of the sort of buttons that would sort of end up exploding and becoming a mess in the after, like for the rest of the day, would sort of like ruin the day, is he had teenage girls who all spoke a different like a language that he didn't know. And one of them would kind of bark at the other one in that language. And the dad would jump straight into like, go do this, or like he would sort of go into command and demand mode. And then the girls felt like he was, overstepping, and it would just turn into kind of a blow up between them. So his way to put curiosity into action in this situation was asking, is everything okay? When he started hearing that like conflict, agitation stuff. So instead of jumping in with a command, he would say, is everything okay? And wait for their answer. And he tried it. And he's like, I felt ridiculous. I was like, I know, it's hard. It's hard. These changes can be hard. And sure enough, like the girl said, yeah, and the thing kind of diffused, like whatever was sort of ramping up diffused, and it didn't become a conflict between dad and the girls. So he felt like, okay, there's something here. So another pain point that he was trying to figure out a way to be peaceful with was one of his daughters had a lot of porcupine moments. Her grumpy, prickly self was very, very loud. And so it seemed like even if he said like, hey, can you take out the garbage? She felt like he was accusing her of something when he was really just trying to say like, no, I just can you take out the garbage? Like I wasn't saying you did anything wrong, and it would become this sort of between them. And so his way of being curious with her, like he planned this ahead of time and was like, okay, so he had a conversation with her, not in a moment of frustration when they were doing something else or driving somewhere or whatever. Hey, so when I want to say something to you or like ask you to do something, but I don't want you to think I'm mad at you, what can I do? Her defenses went up right away. Like, what are you talking about? What? And he's like, I'm just curious. Like, I've noticed that this happened. So he stayed in his upstairs brain. He didn't get defensive back when her porcupine spikes came out. And he was like, I've just noticed this happens between us. Like, I say, can you take out the garbage? Or I say, hey, it's your turn to take out the garbage. And then we kind of get into a tussle about it. And she said, they sort of went back and forth on this and landed on start with, can you? And he's like, start with, can you? That's never going to work. Like, what are you talking about? He didn't say that to her, but he's like, okay. And so the first time he did it, he said, can you, let's say it's the take out the garbage thing. Can you take out the garbage? And she kind of, and she paused for a second, and then she did it and didn't get grumpy. And then he tried it again and she got grumpy at him. And he's like, wait, did I say it? I was trying the, can you, like with the, and then she was like, oh yeah. And then she went ahead and did the thing. It gave them a touch point to come back to because he wasn't just in command and demand mode. I give you these examples because these are the everyday kind of parenting things that we all wrestle with, right? Like, how do we navigate these grumpy moments that turn into blowups? How do we take out the garbage from turning into our whole evening's ruined and my kids running away? Maybe I feel conscious of, I know sometimes the behaviors are bigger than not taking out the garbage. I know that. I think sometimes we can help lower the temperature with these strategies on the little stuff as well as on the big stuff. Like if we start to put these things in practice, then we have a way forward for when things do get really hard. And that seems hopeful for everyone involved. Okay. We have a couple minutes left. I want to talk about this last part of PACE. And hopefully, actually, as I pull my screen up, I'm hoping that you're jotting a couple things down that might just be something to try, right? That might be something to give, to give a try. Maybe it's something you need to talk about with somebody you trust first before you try and put it on and wear it. That's fine. I just think this can be so powerful when kids can, yeah, pace is just such a powerful brain builder. Okay, so let's talk about empathy. When you are really upset, when your tiger brain is loud and you're fuming or super stressed, we talked about this a little bit last time. What helps you? What helps you when you are really stressed or really upset? What do you need in that moment? Pull up my chat here. Or maybe the tiger moment isn't resonating. Maybe when you're overwhelmed at work or with kid stuff and your brain is shutting down or you're feeling super prickly, would it help you? Yeah, I see, to step away and take a breather. Would it help you if your boss started threatening consequences? Like if your boss is like, well, I'm taking away lunch break if you don't, whatever. I'm guessing that wouldn't feel very good. Like that's not what you need when you are in distress. Our kids are so often in distress, right? So when I want us to think about how we can approach that in a similar way, or maybe a little bit different way, because we're all different. So some need compassion, some need the other person to understand, some need a few minutes away, or take a walk, or get a little laughter or fun or connection in a movie night, or take a breath and have a little positive self-talk. I think having conversations about what we need in moments of stress, having conversations about what our turtle and tiger and porcupine brains need is just so powerful. And one of the things that is often calming is a little bit of empathy, not sympathy, but empathy. I feel like Brene Brown explains this well. Some of you may have seen this before, but let's just take a little look at the difference between empathy and sympathy.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. Yeah. And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now. I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
I think so that is all well and good and a good quote, right? Connection makes things better. That becomes more complicated when you have learned that connection is a source of danger, when connection hasn't always been safe. Our kids don't always say they're sad or overwhelmed or frustrated, right? They act out. So I think empathy in our world a lot of times looks like this, like it's just kind of getting on their level for a minute and not expecting something of them, not expecting them to be different than they are right there in that moment. This picture was kind of viral years ago for a hot minute, and I read the article about the situation, and this woman said, I went into mom mode. This kid was kind of melting down and had laid on the floor at this event. I wasn't being a police officer. I was just being a mom. And it was a kid who needed a minute, you know? Empathy sounds like these kinds of things. I hear you. I get how that feels really crummy. I wish this could be different too. That is really sad, scary, hard. It is hard to wait for the court appointment, the court hearing. I can't believe it got postponed again. I'm so sorry, buddy. Sometimes empathy sounds like, ugh, or just sitting in silence next to the person. The other thing I think is really important to understand about empathy is it is feeling with, and your kids have a lot of feelings, and you can't feel all of them with them. That is part of what I love about PACE, is that there are times that it hurts too much to be in the feels, but you can come up to acceptance, right? You can have compassion for maybe why it's so much, even if you can't feel that so much with them. So I want to give you a little in vivo example of that from a mom who is super kind and brave in allowing this to be shared. This was in a different sort of series of training that we were doing talking about PACE.
So I have a daughter. I'm an adoptive parent. And so I have a daughter who is going to be 13. She's like 12 and a half right now. And she definitely escalates pretty easily. Like right now, her big escalation is about the fact that there's a trip coming up that the older kids are going on that she cannot be a part of.
Yeah.
And so that's triggering a lot of abandonment, a lot of, I hear constantly, it's not fair, it's not fair, it's not fair, it's not fair, it's not fair.
Yeah. Right, because it hits all those jealousy things too of the
Mm-hmm. Yes,
the
exactly.
bio
Jealous,
kids
very
versus
jealous.
Yeah.
And it's been hard
So-
because, we've got COVID wrapped into all of this. So, there hasn't been a lot of other things happening. So this feels like here's an opportunity to do something. I don't get to be part of it. I'll give an example of something that happened just recently. So she'll come into my room and be like, I can't take this anymore. She doesn't understand. And it's not fair that she gets to go on a trip and I wasn't able to go on a trip, and they got to go on a trip last year. And I didn't get to do anything, and it's not fair. And I'm not going to apologize for it because she doesn't understand. And I'm the victim here. I'm the one who's something is wrong and not her. But she wants me to apologize, and I shouldn't have to apologize because it's not my fault. It's not fair. They get to go do everything,
honey.
and she could go.
It is so frustrating.
It is frustrating because it's everyone thinks I should be okay, and I'm not okay. It's not all right. It's not fair. It's not fair at all. I should be able to do something. And what I understand Joshua can go because he's going to be in college, and so it's important for him to go, but she shouldn't have to go. She's got time to go to that trip. I should be going to because she went and did something last year.
Fair.
No, it's not right. It's not right. And you don't understand. And I keep telling you, and I think you should take me, and you're not listening to me, and nobody cares about what I feel.
That would feel awful. Oh my gosh, you feel like I'm not even hearing you.
You're not hearing me. I keep telling you, and nobody's listening to me. And I'm not going to apologize because I'm allowed to feel how I want to feel. And it's wrong. It's just wrong.
It does. It feels so wrong. Here we've had this horrible year of COVID and everything's been shut down. And
And now your sister gets to go and you don't get to go. And that does not feel fair. You know what? It's kind of not fair, is it?
It's
really
not fair.
stinks. It really stinks. It really stinks. Ah.
So just keep doing that, because for me as the parent, it's like trying to match her, but at the same time, like my level of exhaustion, like she can go for like a while. And so trying to like, I think I'm always like, oh my gosh, like how much longer is this going to go on?
Yes. Right. I liked, Jerry, you said something similar. It made me think of like your brainstem. You're like you as the parent, and I can viscerally feel this as a parent, right? I'm in therapy mode now. I can do that. But as a parent, that I want to go to reason, or I want I want them to be reasonable. The reason it feels unnatural is it's not what we're used to. We're used to trying to flip into reason. And so even in that moment, as I was practicing it with you, like I had to keep reminding myself, like, match the feeling, feel the feeling, like it's the feeling. It's not, because she's really feeling unheard, even though you've heard her, she's feeling unheard. And so that's where that intensity of like, oh my gosh, you know what? You're right. It really isn't fair. You acknowledging it is super helpful, of saying, that's not fair. This really stinks. And I can't even imagine, especially because there are other things that have been not fair for you. Really, really not fair for you. I get how this just pushes all your buttons. It pushes all your buttons. And that totally makes sense. So she doesn't feel like she's crazy and has to keep convincing you of how bad this is.
That's really helpful.
Okay.
Yeah, because I think definitely what resonated with me was what you saying about her feeling like she's unheard, because that's definitely, like, in my mind as a parent, I'm thinking to myself, like, you've told me this before, like I know exactly what you're gonna say, like it's the same thing over and over again, but I hear what you're saying, like she feels very unheard, and so I need to help her to feel like I actually am really hearing her.
It's complicated, right? We're trying to do something different than we've done it. But when we can approach with pace, when we can get our self-regulation on and practice some playfulness and acceptance and curiosity and empathy, we create space not just for better behavior, but for sturdy, well-connected upstairs brains that are going to serve our kids well, maybe long after they're out of your home and in other people's homes, or back with mom, or their birth family, or maybe on into adulthood. This is part of what we do as we parent in probably a little bit different way than you were parented. So I really want you to jot a couple notes for yourself. What are you taking with you? Maybe what are things that you want to do more of, something you want to try, something you've done before that you're kind of reminded, oh yeah, that really worked well. I've kind of fallen out of the habit. Are there any things that you want to do less of, that you want to kind of like, oof, I got to get out of that habit? Or any light bulb moments that you want to make sure that you're holding on to? Just take 30 seconds and jot it down before you get up and go about the other 14 things that have to happen tonight. As I mentioned, I will get some notes to Amy so that you just have this to look back at. It's a lot of information, and I don't want you to feel like you have to remember every single thing. If you want that glimmers and triggers sort of tracker sheet, this is what you're going to do. You're going to go to /grow, pop your name and email address in here, and then you'll get an email. Hit reply and say North Dakota. I will send you that glimmers and triggers tracker so that you can start to tune in even more to your upstairs and downstairs brain. All right, next week, we're breaking the cycle of defiance and disrespect. Throughout the week, I'd love to hear if you're using any of the elements of PACE. Send me a quick email. It's always nice to hear how this is going, especially when we don't get to be in the room and have the chat together. I read every single email that comes in, even if I'm not able to respond to every single one. All right, friends, I hope to see all of you next week as we talk about breaking that cycle of defiance and disrespect. Have a great night.
Thanks for joining us. Have a good week, everyone. Take care.